So yes, when you do this, the state is going to ask you for your name also because they want to know who the trustee is or the administrator or who's the person that they can deal with. But the actual tag will be registered to the trust. So if they run the license plate number, it's going to come back ABC Work Group Trust or whatever. Again, so this is another alternative you can do if you don't want to have a tag on your vehicle. So we covered, using the DOT number and just writing with no tag, or transferring your vehicle into a trust and getting tags issued to the trust. And again, I would encourage you, if you're going to do the latter one, just do Google, read your state code about titles and registrations, and I'm pretty certain that you'll find that you're not going to have an issue putting the property in trust. Although it may be new to your employees at the state, it can be done, and I'm speaking from firsthand knowledge here. All right, so now let's talk about the license issue. We all know that you don't need a license to operate a vehicle or to travel because it's an unalienable right, if you will. Now, a lot of people, in my experience, they get caught up in the double-edged sword because if they do get pulled over and then the police officer asks them for a license and they say, well, I don't have a license, or I don't need a license, or I didn't know I was required to have one, or whatever it is that they say, then the officer proceeds to ask for an ID. And this is the catch-22 because U.S. citizens have to have driver's license to drive, quote unquote, right? Now, when they ask you, do you have a license, and you say no, and then they ask you to produce an ID, and you say you produce a passport, well, now you've just prima facie evidence you kind of just validate the presumption that you're a United States citizen, and then you find yourself getting locked up or something because now they believe you fall under statutory law and you're driving without a license. And then the other issue is if you produce no license at all, let's not say license, but identification at all, because that's what they're asking you for, then under this new, homeland security type of stuff, then they can lock you up because you haven't been identified and you could potentially be a threat or domestic terrorism. So it's a catch-22. And if you produce the wrong type of ID, then they'll try to say, oh, this is a fraudulent ID or something like that. So this is kind of why, I highly recommend an affidavit of identification. Now, here's a sample of a affidavit of identification that we have on thctrust.org. Not the prettiest document in the world, but we're not going for pretty. And this doesn't have to be Moorish American. You can change this to whatever you like. But what we did is we created an affidavit because affidavits are recognized in law. They can't be fraudulent. They can't be deemed to be fraudulent. And we've put the essential elements on this affidavit that identification has to have. And it changes state to state, but for the most part, the essentials are a picture, an address, and an expiration date. I don't know if I have an expiration date on here. So listen to what I'm telling you, because if you don't find the expiration date on this document, make sure that you add it. But for the most part, as I said, you want an address, you want a picture, you want an expiration date, and it should be signed. So that's what constitutes identification. So now if you have an affidavit of identification, you don't have a driver's license, but you've covered the angle of having identification on you. So it's a safer position to be in. You just gotta know, you gotta premeditate these things, and you have to think about these things. You have to have a protocol in place so when you get pulled over, you get stopped, you know how to operate. Now, I also want to talk about, I want to back up a little bit. Say if you have the, because I've been in this situation before. I was actually driving. I didn't have no license. I didn't have any insurance. I didn't have anything. I had my mother in my car with me, as a matter of fact. But I was pulled over, and they ran the license plates, and at that time I had the trust plates on the truck or my vehicle, and the officers were wanting to search the vehicle, and they were pretty much saying, hey, look, you don't have a license, you don't have any of the paperwork we wanted to, ask you for. So, and we're going to let you go. We're just asking to search the vehicle. And I was able to say, and see, this is my angle, and I want you to pay attention to how I handled this. I didn't say you can't search this, you can't search that. I said, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Police Officer, but what you're asking me to do, I don't have the authority to do it. And he was like, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I'm certain when you ran the license plates that it said ABC Work Group Trust. And I said, I'm just a trustee of that trust. And I said, we have protocols, procedures, and for me to allow you to search this vehicle would be contrary to the indentures and the bylaws. And I said, so I just don't really have the authority to. And he tried to proceed to tell me, well, you're the driver of the vehicle, so you can give me the authority. I said, no, I can't because I'm under contract. And he went as far as to say, do you want to go to jail? You don't have a license, you don't have this, that, and the other, and you don't want to let me search. I said, look, I said, I don't want to go to jail, but you're asking me for something that I don't have the authority to do. I said, so, if I have to go to jail, I guess that's what it would be. I said, now, if you want to search the vehicle on your own commercial liability, you can, but I just can't give you the authority to do that. Anyway, long story short, after a little bit of dialogue back and forth, they let me go. But the point I was trying to make is you see that gives you an angle to come from. Again, you have to have a protocol. And I have a complete protocol for getting stopped, especially if I'm going to be driving without a license or without a standard license plate on my car or no plate at all. So just keep that in mind. Um, Along with this affidavit of identification, if you're a Moorish American, you might want to have a copy of the peace treaty so that you can't be labeled an enemy combatant. And I also, and I don't advise this for everyone, I would use my affidavit of identification first, and then I would probably even use my worldservice.org passport or identification card. And I wouldn't be passing that to them as ID. I would just say, this is my personal property so that you can use it to identify me. But you really want to be careful about passing cards because you don't want them to try to construe you as falsifying identification. And it's a bogus claim. You can beat it, but you don't want to be subject to undue delay or detainment or anything like that. And that's what we're about to talk about next. So we're about to get into the real good part of this that I'm certain everyone is going to enjoy this next part. Now, the documents I'm about to show next, now we'll just go there and we'll just talk about it when we get there. So now you should have an idea of how you can travel without a license plate on your car or having a license plate that's not registered to your strawman name. And for those of you that wish to travel without a driver's license, I've just shed a little bit of light on how you can do that too safely. And now one thing you got to remember is you got to be peaceful. Never start telling a police officer what they can and cannot do. And what we're about to talk about now is a couple of contracts that I've created that you can put in place to make your job a whole lot easier and to create a situation to where you don't have to say much. Okay? You have rights. You have the right to remain silent. So consider exercising that. And you can, and I've done this before. You can ask a police officer, officer, do I have rights? And of course they'll tell you yes. Then say, well, with all due respect, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but I would like to exercise my right to remain silent. Okay, so you can say what you have to say, and then say you're going to exercise your right to remain silent, and then do so. Okay. Of course, put that in context. I was just sharing that with you as something you can do. But the next documents I'm going to discuss, which is something very powerful for you guys to add to your arsenal, especially when it comes to using or exercising your right to travel. And I'm going to talk about a couple of different documents that I've created at thctrust.org. You can join the premium subscription group for it's $16 a month, and you don't have to stay in there forever. You stay in there for a couple of months. That will be supportive in helping us out, and you can and you will also have you'll have access to these documents. Now these are, I must say, I put a lot of work in these documents, so I don't want to spend too much time on them, but I'm going to try to explain to you how you can use them. So The first document is a notice, and I'm just going to start here because this encapsulates all the documents. The notice goes to a distribution list A. And let me do that again. The notice goes to a distribution list A. So it's from the Office of the General Executor of the estate of John Alex Doe. We send things from the Office of the General Executor because that means police officers, sheriffs, and other government employees, they become trustees. So we always want things coming from the executor because they're required to take heed to what the executor says, whether they know it or not. Anyways, this goes to distribution list A. It's a notice of John Alex Doe, notice of John Alex Doe trust addendum. I have to change that. It should read something different. But what I'm going to be showing you here is the grantor slash settler's assertion of the John Alex Doe trademark right to travel. That's going to be one document that I'm going to share with you. And there's a fee schedule attached to that. And you guys are going to love this, so just bear with me. And the next document is an affidavit of non-United States citizen, comma, national status, and the U.S. governing law of treason in excess jurisdiction. All right, so let's start with the grantors. Well, first let's start with the affidavit of non-United States citizenship and national status. The reason why I add this document, this is going to be one of our travel documents, although it's not limited to just travel. But this is going to be a travel document because one thing I like to do is I want to rebut any presumption that I'm a United States citizen or that I'm subject to the codes and statutes and all of those good things. Because I find out that now police officers, they know what a sovereign is, and that way if you are going to profess to be a sovereign, don't be belligerent, because they're also expecting a sovereign to be belligerent. But they know they have to proceed with caution, and they know that they can potentially create liabilities for themselves if they do not interact properly with a sovereign. So this right here is an affidavit of non-United States citizenship, national status, and what this does is it repudiates any presumption that you are a United States citizen, therefore letting them know that you're not necessarily obligated to statutes, codes, and ordinances and things that are not law. Notice I call this an international maritime contract. I also put after recording return to John Alex Doe, blah, 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 the address. The reason is because this document needs to be recorded in public record. We'll talk about that towards the end. But let me just kind of read through it so you can see the important stuff. Now, obviously, it's an affidavit. We see that. It's set up in the form of an affidavit. And you have your jurat down here, etc., etc. So let's just read a few things. The first thing says, I repudiate, rescind, revoke, and remove my signature from any contract to include residency and citizenship, whether express or implied, with the United States and or the state of Georgia, their agencies and or signs. I'm unaware of the existence of any such contracts, and therefore the existence of such contracts is held to be unconscionable, unenforceable against me as per UCC 2-302. You can look that up. The state of Georgia and the United States and or any representatives thereof shall be afforded 14 days to present evidence of its contract and its commercial setting, purpose, and effect to make a final determination on its validity and legitimacy. I do not accept the liability associated with a compelled agreement of any unrevealed commercial contract. So basically, this whole thing, you can read through this whole thing. I'm not going to read through the rest of it. But when you read through this whole thing, it pretty much is you rebutting the presumption of residency and any other presumption of implied contracts that make you a party to the statutes that they're trying to hold against you. So, and this is a very good document. This is not only with your right to travel. You can use this in court. If you're showing up as a national or an American in the Republic, you can put this document, this rescission, repudiation of obligation, and all that kind of stuff. You can put that in there so that it would be apparent that you reside outside of the jurisdiction. and consequently, that's why this is actually two documents combined in one. And the next document that we're going to talk about is the U.S. Governing law of treason and excess jurisdiction. But before I get to that, I also want to draw your attention to this small declaratory. Oh, it's not. That's not it. Um, there's something in here where well, there's a part in this affidavit, and I don't know exactly where it is, where the intention is claimed to be a national and not a citizen of the United States. That's something that's talked about on the Department of State website. You can, I think Rob Ryder made a video about that, but basically, you know, the way to withdraw your United States citizenship or establish for the record your intention not to be a United States citizen is by declaration in front of an officer. So that's what we're doing here, and that's also written in this instrument somewhere. For the Moorish Americans, if you're not Moorish American, you can take this out. But I put here, I hereby declare my status. Oh, here it is. This is what I was talking about. I hereby declare my status to be a national and not a citizen of the United States pursuant 8 U.S.C. 1452 B1, nor am I a U.S. citizen, and hereby exercise my right to self-determination for the renunciation of United States citizenship freely and voluntarily without force, compulsion, or undue influence placed upon John Alex Doe by any person. Um, so and I took this right off the Department of State. That's what they want to see to denounce your U.S. citizenship. So that's what we just did here. And now, for everybody thinking that, oh, once I do this, does this mean that I can't go to work and I can't do? It doesn't work like that. Your documents are your tools for you to use. They are not to be used against you. Okay, so don't even worry about that. Right? This is just so we can exercise our right to travel.